Closing sales is the easiest part of business. It's everything else that matters. It's easy to isolate sales and hone that one skill, but there are many factors that can hinder a great salesman from closing. Let me show you what I mean with a quick question. If somebody was dying from dehydration, how hard would it be to sell them water? You literally wouldn't even have to speak. They'd give you all the money they had and more. Once your product, messaging, conviction, and target market are dialed, sales is just convincing people to buy what they need. That really comes down to a few well-timed questions and knowing how your product solves their specific pain point. It's a game of understanding. Selling is the transference of conviction over the bridge of trust. And when you've done the hard work of figuring out how to best serve them, you're convicted that they actually need it to change their life. You understand their pain points and ideal outcomes, and it sets you up to sell really well by asking great questions to solidify trust and walk them over the bridge. So, what does that really look like when you're selling, when you have great conviction, when your product market fit works, your target market is dialed, and your messaging is on point? You're getting very qualified prospects to a meeting. And really, sales is probably the first thing that's pushed for entrepreneurship because it is important. Learning how to influence people is important. The only way you can get all that other stuff on point is by understanding the sales process. Because really, Layla Hormozi talks about this. When you're selling and you really know how to sell, the questions and answers and stories that you tell when you're selling somebody are the same questions, answers, and stories that you're going to put in your marketing to attract more people. And then once you qualify those people from your marketing, it's the selling process that really helps you understand your target market more and tweak the sales process, tweak the marketing process. And that's when your target market is dialed. That's when your offer becomes more dialed because you understand the objections that are coming up. And you're like, oh, well, let me tweak my offer to handle this objection. And so now, they're going to say this, and this. And my product does this, and that. So I solve all their objections and more. That's what the sales process helps you do. Understand objections, get the messaging right, and that's why it's probably the most important skill that people talk about. But if you're really good at sales and you're really good at persuasion and your product is a dud, your target market can't afford the product, your ideal client doesn't feel understood by you with the marketing and the messaging, your sales is going to suck, and it's just because you're not getting qualified leads or you're not getting enough leads. That's why I really wanted to bring up the point that everything else matters, and sales is really understanding people really well, putting a great offer in front of them, and then it's kind of stupid for them not to say yes. And of course, there might be some little things that you need to do to push people over the edge, but ultimately, I think sales is it's important. It's important for sure, but I think the other things are more important first because you don't get a chance to sell if you don't have an ideal market, a good offer, and your marketing and messaging on point. But speaking of the sales process, you've done the marketing, you understand the target market, you've got the offer, and all of this got them to a meeting. Now you're sitting in the discovery phase of a sales call. And really that starts with you just asking questions. Hey, what brought you here today? What are you looking to do? Tell me what you've done before to solve this problem. And you're just trying to understand the context of their life around the problem that they have. So again, what brought you here today? What are you trying to get out of the call? Tell me a bit more about what you've done. And you ask some follow-up questions in that to clarify and make sure you really understand their pain points and you really understand their ideal outcome. Because your ideal customer might have 5 different pain points and 3 different ideal outcomes, but this specific person might have 2 pain points that really suck. The other 3 they've kind of handled, and then they might have 1 ideal outcome they're really going for. And if that's the case, you take their pain points and you take their ideal outcome and you put that all into how you present the product later. And that means you just have to know your product well enough to know, hey, it solves these pain points in this way to get you to this ideal outcome, and you would highlight the aspects of the product that match the certain pain points and get them to the specific ideal outcome. So the discovery phase, you seek to understand the customer, their pain points, their ideal outcomes. And in this phase, this is a Hormozi thing, I'm pretty sure. He talked about giving them like an identity anchor. like as they're talking, I think Never Split the Difference talks about this a bit as well. But Hormozy ties it to identity, not emotion. Never Split the Difference is like, it seems like you're angry, and you give them the chance to affirm whether they're angry or not. Well, Hormozy's like, during the sales process, if you're like, hey, what brought you here today? I'm just trying to lose weight so that I can live to see my kids grow up. It seems like you're a family man. And I'm like, yeah, I am a family man. I love my family. Or it's like, hey, I'm just trying to buy this so that I can make more money in my business so I can pay my employees more. It looks like you really embrace servant leadership, or it seems like you go the extra mile for your employees. Like, yeah, I do go the extra mile for my employees. You give them a positive aspect of their identity that they can cling to, because then you can come back to it later in the sales process and say, hey, I know that you are really trying to show up well for your employees or go the extra mile for your employees. And honestly, I think this product is the perfect thing to do that because. And so now, because of people like to be consistent with their self-perception of themselves, and through that consistency, they'll be more likely to buy. Because they've already said that they're a person who cares for their employees. And if people who care for their employees like them do stuff like this, that is a very powerful link that you can make to get them to the other side of the transaction. When objections come up, I took this from Brad Lee, it really is just asking a hypothetical to overcome the objection. And so if somebody's like, this thing is too expensive, you're like, oh, too expensive? They're like, yeah, I can't afford it right now. This is happening, this stuff. You see how I mirrored there? Too expensive? This is happening, that's happening, blah, blah, blah. Goats are yellow now, and so I can't buy. I just use the goats are yellow now because people just give a lot of excuses. But those excuses are real to them. And so when they say, it's too expensive and it's a $10,000 thing, be like, well, what price would it have to be for you to buy it right now? Just hypothetically. Like $3,000. It's like, oh, okay. So if this was $3,000 right now, you could pull out your credit card and we could buy and there would be nothing else stopping you from moving forward. I'm like, well, I'm not sure how much it's going to work. I had a friend that did this and they ended up failing and getting out of it before it worked for them. Boom. Another objection that you need to handle. Now they don't trust your product. It's like, oh, well, where did the friend fail? It's like, oh, the friend failed in week 3 because they couldn't get enough leads. It's like, yeah, when did they do this? They did 2 years ago. Well, since 2 years ago, we've done this with the product to ensure that people get more leads and insert guarantee to add value. If you don't get leads by week 3, we will do X, Y, and Z. We will literally go get the leads for you ourselves and drop them in your lab. And so you can insert guarantees to overcome those objections, but also ask a hypothetical question and dive deeper with mirroring and clarifying questions to really understand what is stopping the people from moving forward. And the whole sales process is really seeking to understand and asking great questions, and then just a few minutes of presenting the solutions. And when it comes to presenting the solutions, it looks like telling great stories. So you can tell great stories in like 1 to 2 minute parables. This is all from pretty much Alex Hormozy's closer video, and his closer video probably does a better job of doing this. He has a couple of them, but his closer framework. But basically, it's kind of a small little metaphor that will help people get across the other side or understand exactly what they're doing. And I actually didn't prepare any metaphors beforehand, but let's see if I can think of one off the top of my head. I don't know. I think when I was trying to sell my wife on coming to Austin, there were a bunch of these metaphors that I had to do, but it was like an imagine if for me. So it wasn't a, hey, you know the parable of the prodigal son? It wasn't like that. And that's something you pull in. If you're selling something to Christians and it's like, hey, you know the parable of the prodigal son where he left, he did all this crap, and then he came back, and the father was waiting for him? Well, a lot of our clients, they meet us, and we have everything they need. And they leave, and they just go and they eat what pigs can give them trying to work with other companies. Eventually, they come back to us, and we've been waiting for them. That's a wild story. I don't know if you want to tell that one, but it's very similar. And for me, I was an imagine if type of guy. of like, hey, what if we go to Austin together? We launch. It kind of gives us our own independence because, her family is very involved. My family is less involved. And so I felt like we needed some space launching into adulthood, launching it into married life. So imagine if this is what our life looked like. That's kind of the stories that I use to sell my wife on coming to Texas. You can use the prodigal son story. You can use other parables that a lot of people know, or you can use like common animal metaphors that people know. It's different for every thing that you're trying to sell. But when you come up with those quick hit stories of like, hey, I know you're experiencing this problem, but you know this story? In this story, they're experiencing that problem too, and this is how it's solved, and this is essentially how we solve it, right? We help you with this emotional need that you have or this practical need. And then the last thing I want to talk about is, so you have the discovery phase, you have identity affirmations, or just having identity anchors, whatever you want to call it, hypothetical questions to overcome objections. You got the power of short little stories or metaphors to really help people understand what exactly your product does for them, and even the process of which your product solves the problem. You just got sales in everyday life. I tell you this because you guys know all this. Like anytime you have a conversation with somebody, you seek to understand them. You ask great questions and you listen. And then you affirm how they're feeling when you're trying to be empathetic. And it seems like you feel this, or, I know how it feels to feel like this. Is that actually how you feel? Am I getting this correct? Like, you start to anchor their identity and their emotion when they're telling you a situation so that you demonstrate understanding. So you ask questions about a situation, you anchor identity and emotion in conversation with people. And then, if you're a guy, you're probably listening to your significant other or a friend talk, and they give you a problem, and you're like, oh, so if we did this, would that solve it? There's a hypothetical question to overcome objections. They really don't like their friend. If we did this, would you like your friend? No. Okay, so there's something else we need to solve. It's getting to the solution. And the power of stories, every human tells stories. And that's sales in everyday life. It seems like this really intangible skill that people need to go acquire, but really we're all doing it. You simply need to hone it, and specifically around a product that you have conviction over. Because when we do our best selling, it is persuasion, it is convincing, which we've done to people our whole life because it's how we get anything we want. But it's because there's conviction behind the reason we're doing it. And when you develop that conviction around your product or service because it actually changes people's lives, your natural persuasion skills will come out and show. So that's what we got for you guys today on the show. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you on the next one. And remember, we are a community of people judged not by our wealth, but by our impact.